Now, as you've probably already heard, and if you haven't, I guess I'm about to be the bearer of what many will consider bad news, but despite rumors and reports that Kathleen Kennedy was on her way out at Lucasfilm, she is instead getting her contract renewed and will remain as president of Lucasfilm for the next 3 years at least. And I know that for some of you out there, this will be a day long remembered as the end of Star Wars, because you refuse to support the franchise as long as she's at the helm. And as I've expressed many times before, I personally do not feel she is a good fit for the job, that she seems to lack a passion or love for Star Wars, which obviously seems like something that is required to steer the future of the franchise and to make decisions about what kinds of projects should be greenlit. For example, if you sat Kevin Feige down, and he of course runs the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you talked some comic books with him, his knowledge, love, and passion for comics would not only be obvious, but it'd likely be on par, if not surpass, even the most devout comic book fans out there. In other words, comics is something he'd be into even if he wasn't in the position he's in. Whereas if you sat Kathleen Kennedy down in a room and talked Star Wars with her, I honestly don't know how well she could hold her own. I don't know how much, on a personal level, she cares about the universe, the characters, the stories, and so on, because I don't recall one single interview with her where she ever talks about what Star Wars truly means to her personally. Being president of Lucasfilm is likely just a job to her, one she no doubt takes very seriously and, contrary to the belief of some, one she wants to get right, but I don't think being at the helm is a dream come true for her. Instead, I think it's more the icing on top of the cake that is her career. While being at the helm of the MCU is clearly more than just a job to Kevin Feige, it is a dream come true for him, and it's hard to argue with the results of having someone who has such love and reverence for the source material in charge. Not to mention, he is almost universally supported by the fanbase of the MCU, which is of course not the case for Kennedy and the Star Wars fanbase. And no, I don't think it is an absolute requirement that you must love Star Wars in order to run Lucasfilm, but if you don't, you better surround yourself with the right people and be able to make the right choices in regards to the franchise, which is something that you could certainly argue Kennedy has not done. Both anthology movies have been production nightmares, with Gareth Edwards essentially being replaced by Tony Gilroy on Rogue One, and Lord and Miller being fired late in filming on Solo and replaced by Ron Howard. Then there is, of course, Rian Johnson, who was given an entire new trilogy to create before The Last Jedi even came out, to, shall we say, mixed reviews from fans. And I really do hope that Johnson went to Kennedy with an actual idea for this trilogy first. Not that she basically asked him if he'd like to create something new without having any clue what he might actually do. I mean, I just don't think you ask if people want to make Star Wars movies. You instead let them come to you with already well-formed ideas and plans, if not entire scripts. You don't just say, hey, would you like to make a Star Wars movie, and then hope for the best. And look, I'm not trying to question Kathleen Kennedy's intelligence. She's clearly a smart woman, but I do question her love, devotion, and understanding of the franchise she runs and the fans that support it. And I know many people will quickly want to point out that George Lucas himself appointed her to be president of Lucasfilm before he sold the company. And if she wasn't a Star Wars fan, and if he didn't think she could do the job well, why in the world would he do that? Well, my only guess is that since the two are good friends, Lucas probably assumed Kennedy would still listen to him and take input from him. That, in a sense, maybe Lucas could still call a few shots from the sidelines and still be an unofficial part of the franchise he created without having to be the face of it anymore. And that, of course, is just an unfounded theory, but when you consider Lucas gave story treatments for the sequel trilogy, ones that apparently were completely thrown out, it tends to lend at least a shred of credibility to such a theory. As does how bitter Lucas initially seemed shortly after selling, and especially after The Force Awakens came out. He even, in one interview, talked about how the Star Wars movies were like his children, and how he essentially sold them to white slavers, or basically how he had sold Star Wars to those who would take it and squeeze as much money out of it as they possibly could. And apparently, despite the aforementioned behind-the-scenes problems, Disney is happy with the financial results they're getting from Kathleen Kennedy. And to be fair, the first 3 Star Wars movies under her leadership did do incredibly well at the box office, and all of them made over $1 billion worldwide. The Force Awakens even made slightly over $2 billion and sits as the 3rd highest grossing movie of all time. Those are results that are hard to ignore and hard to fire someone over, even if a sizable percentage of the fan base does have an issue with her. However, the 4th movie to come out under her watch, that of course being Solo, saw a steep drop-off and didn't even cross the $400 million mark worldwide, and is thought to have lost the company somewhere between $50 and $80 million, which of course many thought would seal Kennedy's fate. After all, who would have ever imagined a Star Wars movie would ever lose money, especially after only 4 movies into its current iteration, if you will. And yet, not only is Kennedy not being fired, her contract is being extended 3 years and will take her into 2021. And as I alluded to at the top, some fans out there will see this as the end. But honestly, I don't see it that way at all. Not when combined with Bob Iger's recent announcement that Star Wars is going to be slowing down and basically reevaluating its approach. There's also news that Episode 9 is going to be advertised as the end of the Skywalker saga. And what this all means is that after Episode 9, the next Star Wars movie probably won't come out until 2021, 2 years after Episode 9, and again after the end of the Skywalker saga, or era, if you will. And this will of course be the same year Kennedy's contract will expire, and when she'll likely be replaced by someone who will take Star Wars into the future and into a new era beyond the Skywalkers. And when you really start to think about it, what decisions does Kennedy have to make in the next 3 years? Episode 9 is currently the only movie said to be in production, and we know that Benioff and Weiss, the Game of Thrones writers, are working on movies that I'd imagine may start in 2021. There's also the Rian Johnson trilogy, which I have expressed my doubts about ever happening, but is also said to still be coming out or in pre-production. And with those 2 projects in the works and the claimed slowdown coming, I highly doubt that in the next 3 years Kennedy will have to make any major decisions on the movie front. And then when you factor in that a new live-action show is set to start on Disney's streaming service next year, and that a new animated show will be starting next week and will likely run for a few years, you begin to realize that the immediate future for Star Wars is set, and you begin to ask yourself if Kennedy's extension is just them allowing her to bow out gracefully while they continue to search for the right person to replace her and to take Star Wars into the future. So in other words, even as someone who is not a fan of Kathleen Kennedy, I don't take this news as something akin to the sky falling. I know some fans out there will either disagree with my assessment and say that this isn't letting her bow out gracefully, but that she is instead being rewarded for being a good steward of the franchise. And as I said earlier, you can't argue with the fact that 3 of the 4 movies to come out under her leadership were huge financial successes. I also know that other fans out there just won't care anymore, that Kennedy possibly getting fired was the shred of hope they were clinging to, and after this news, if they hadn't given up on Star Wars already, they will now. And if that's your stance, well, then that's your stance. I'd of course urge you to hold out hope that perhaps soon enough things will change and that the future of Star Wars is going to be bright under new leadership eventually. But if you want to abandon ship for now, that's completely up to you. Either way, I'm not going anywhere, and I really do see these recent 2 announcements about slowing down Star Wars and Kennedy getting her contract renewed as being connected, and that soon enough, someone else will be running the show and taking Star Wars into a new era. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about this announcement of Kathleen Kennedy getting her contract extended. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.